There are places that breathe, not with the warm sigh of life, but with the shallow, rattling gasp of something trapped, something that remembers the cold embrace of the earth far too intimately. The rain lashed against the windshield like frantic skeletal fingers as Matt's old van shuddered to a halt. Before him, hunched against the bruised Ohio sky like a broken-backed beast, stood the Abernathy House. It wasn't grand decay, not anymore. It was consumed decay. Victorian bones swallowed by ivy the color of dried blood, windows shattered into jagged, sightless eyes. The air, even through the closed van window, tasted of wet stone, rotting wood, and something else. Something metallic and faintly sweet, like old pennies left in the sun. Forgotten. Matt wasn't a believer. Not really. He was a technician. Wires, sensors, EMF readers, these were his faith. He dealt in measurable anomalies, not phantoms. Beside him, Evelyn clutched her digital recorder like a talisman. Her empathy was her instrument, a raw nerve attuned to the echoes of sorrow. And in the back, Leo, barely 20, fidgeted with his infrared camera, eyes wide with a mix of bravado and barely concealed dread. They were the Midwestern Paranormal Research Group, logic, feeling, and youthful energy. Tonight they sought the cold facts behind the Abernathy legend, the disappearances, the whispers, the cold spots that could freeze the marrow in your bones. The front door groaned open on rusted hinges, exhaling a breath of frigid, tomb-dry air that carried the undeniable scent of dust, mildew, and beneath it all, that faint, coppery tang. The foyer yawned wide, swallowed by shadows that seemed thicker than natural night. Their flashlight beams cut nervous swaths through the gloom, illuminating peeling wallpaper adorned with faded, sinister floral patterns, and a grand staircase that spiraled upwards into utter blackness. Dust motes danced like agitated spirits in the fractured light. EMF spiking near the stairs, Matt muttered, his voice tight. The device in his hand screeched a sudden sharp whine. Evelyn flinched. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Like static, but cold, inside my chest." They moved deeper, the oppressive silence broken only by the crunch of plaster underfoot and the frantic hammering of their own hearts. The house felt watchful, not hostile, not yet, but intensely aware, hungry for their presence. They documented peeling paint that resembled agonized faces, strange temperature drops that made their breath plume, and fleeting shadows that darted just beyond the edge of their lights. Tricks of the mind, Matt insisted, though his knuckles were white on the EMF meter. It was in the second-floor hallway, lined with doors like rotten teeth in a decaying jaw, that the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thick, heavy, pressing down on them like a physical weight. Evelyn stopped, her face pale in the LED glow. "Listen," she breathed. "Nothing. Just the oppressive silence and the phantom scratching." "No," she insisted, closing her eyes. "Not with your ears. Feel it." Leo trained his infrared camera down the hall. "It's colder down there. Way colder." Matt's EMF meter screamed again, the needle pinned. And then Evelyn's recorder, resting in her trembling hand, activated by itself. The red recording light blinked like a malevolent eye. A wave of profound, suffocating sadness washed over them, a grief so vast and ancient it felt like drowning in ink. Tears welled unbidden in Leo's eyes. Matt felt a crushing weight of despair settle on his shoulders. They huddled in what might have once been a nursery. Faded, peeling wallpaper showed cartoonish lambs, now stained and sinister. A broken rocking chair sat in the corner, a ghost of movement implied in the dust. It was the epicenter of the cold, the sadness. Evelyn set her recorder deliberately on the warped floorboards. Leo set up his camera, the night vision casting the room in an eerie greenish monochrome. Matt deployed a spirit box, its rapid scanning through radio frequencies creating a chaotic static hiss. "Can you hear us?" Evelyn asked, her voice soft, resonant with the empathy that made her both vulnerable and powerful. "Are you here with us?" The spirit box spat fragments of noise, garbled syllables, bursts of white noise, a distorted sob, then, cutting through the chaos like ice, cold. Leo gasped. Matt adjusted the device, his skepticism cracking. "Where are you?" Evelyn pressed gently. The static roared, then cleared for a split second. A deep chill unrelated to the temperature drop seeped into their bones. The scratching sound seemed to grow louder, more frantic, coming from the wall beside the broken rocking chair. Evelyn leaned closer to the spirit box, her own breath catching. "Who are you? What do you need?" The static surged, chaotic and angry, then sudden, terrifying silence, followed by a voice so clear, so desperate, so utterly human, it froze the blood in their veins. It wasn't a roar, not a scream. It was a whimper, a plea torn from a soul in unimaginable torment. "Help me. Help me!" The words hung in the frigid air, vibrating with raw, soul-crushing need. It wasn't a demand, not a threat. It was a begging. A spirit not haunting, but haunted, trapped. Panic warred with a terrible, dawning empathy within them. The fear was primal, the fear of the unseen, the unknown. But layered over it, thicker and more suffocating, was the profound horror of the plea itself. This wasn't a malevolent entity, it was a victim, screaming across the void. "Find my body." The implications slammed into them. This wasn't just a ghost. It was evidence. A soul tethered by violence, by concealment. Evelyn traced her fingers over the nursery wall where the scratching seemed loudest. The wallpaper was damp, crumbling. Beneath her touch, the plaster felt wrong. Less solid. More yielding. Cold seeped through her gloves. "Matt, Leo," she whispered, her voice thick with dread. "This wall, it's not stone underneath. It feels hollow and cold." With trembling hands, using a crowbar Matt retrieved from the van, they began to carefully chip away at the damp plaster. Dust filled the air, choking and thick. The smell intensified, damp earth, decay, and that underlying sickly sweet metallic tang. It was the smell of the grave, improperly sealed. Behind the first layer of lath, they found bricks. Old, unevenly laid bricks, mortared with something dark and crumbling that stained their gloves. But these bricks weren't part of the original structure. They were a patchwork, hastily done, sealing off a space roughly the size of a small closet. A space that shouldn't exist. The cold radiating from the gap was intense, biting. Leo trained his camera light into the opening. The beam pierced the absolute darkness within, illuminating swirling dust motes. And then, it caught something else. Something pale, something small. A child's hand, skeletal, fragile, the tiny bones almost translucent in the harsh light. It lay palm up on the damp, packed earth floor of the hidden space, fingers curled slightly, as if reaching for something just out of grasp. Time stopped. The air left their lungs. The profound sadness that had permeated the house coalesced into a crushing, tangible weight, centered on that tiny, pathetic remnant of a life stolen. Evelyn choked back a sob. Leo turned away, retching. Matt's hands shook violently as he lowered the crowbar, the clatter unnaturally loud in the deathly silence. They had found her, Sarah Abernathy, the bright-eyed 7-year-old who vanished from her bed one stormy night in October 1983. The case that had baffled police, torn the community apart, and eventually faded into a cold, despairing file. Not abducted, not lost, walled alive, in her own nursery, by someone she trusted. The horror wasn't just in the discovery, it was in the why. Police reports later pieced together a grim story. Eleanor Abernathy, Sarah's mother, descending into a psychotic break, fueled by grief after her husband's death. She believed dark forces wanted Sarah, that only by hiding her, sealing her away where the devils couldn't find her, could she save her daughter. In her fractured mind, it was an act of love, a monstrous, suffocating love. As the forensic team arrived, casting harsh, clinical light on the hidden tomb, the atmosphere in the Abernathy house shifted. The crushing sadness didn't vanish, but it changed, lifted, fractionally. The biting cold retreated from the nursery, leaving only the chill of damp stone. The oppressive weight eased, replaced by a profound, echoing emptiness. They gave Sarah Abernathy a proper burial, a small coffin covered in flowers far brighter than the faded lambs on the nursery wall. The town mourned anew, grappling with a horror buried for decades. The Abernathy house, deemed structurally unsound and irredeemably tainted, was slated for demolition. Matt quit paranormal research. The measurable anomalies had become unbearable echoes of a suffering he could never unknow. Leo moved west, seeking sun and open spaces far from enclosed darkness. Evelyn still listens, but she carries the Abernathy house within her now, a cold spot in her own soul. She understands the terrible duality of the veil, the fear that chills the blood, and the desperate, unheard cries that should chill it more. They silenced the scratching in the walls. They answered the whispered plea. They brought light to the hidden dark. But sometimes in the dead of night, Evelyn wakes, not to a sound, but to a feeling. A familiar, icy tendril of despair coiling around her heart. And she wonders if some doors, once opened, can ever truly be closed. The Abernathy house was demolished on June 1st, 2025. Sarah Abernathy rests in Greenfield Cemetery. Eleanor Abernathy died in a state psychiatric facility in 1991. The scratching stopped, the whispers ceased, but the cold lingers. Do you hear dripping? Share your own terrifying tale in the comments below.